Hale, she sang that? Is that?
Good morning, everyone.
Bring us back.
And we'll call the committee of the whole work session to order on this day of Tuesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 2026 at 10:40. In our packet, we have the minutes from our previous meeting, which was provided here on February 17th of 2026. On the agenda today, we have a climate projection presentation and also a deed presentation. Also in our packet, we have information only from the Airport Advisory Commission, the Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee, and the Highway Advisory Committee for information only on that. So I will begin with turning it over to Administrator Treble on the deed presentation.
Oh, the climate presentation?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All good. No, all good. Well, good morning,
Yes,
everybody.
go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in. My name is Seth Spencer. I am an extension educator with the University of Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership. And I'll share a little bit about a project that is going on in the region, and then talk a little bit about some climate projections, and then just share some things that are happening in the area. So, perfect.
What a logo.
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about the Northland Climate Resilience Collaborative, and I might come back to that beautiful picture. But some of you might be aware that we are in year 2 of a 4-year National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration federal grant that was delivered to St. Louis County as the host. It's a $1.8 million planning grant around climate resilience. And what's pretty amazing is that this is the whole scope of the area that this planning grant is focused on. So you'll see, of course, Cook, Lake, St. Louis, and Carleton counties, the 1854 Treaty Authority region, and then Grand Portage, Fond du Lac, and Bois Forte. These are the main partners on this grant, but what we have basically formed is Northland Climate Resilience Collaborative. And so we do have an official logo that kind of looks at both the coastline, but also all the way into kind of Bois Forte in the upper part of St. Louis County. So hopefully this is not a surprise, but Cook County is one of those partners. And then we do have our wonderful partners with the Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District, Lake County and Carleton County Soil and Water Conservation District. And then the 2 facilitators of this project are the Arrowhead Regional Development Commission and then the University of Minnesota. And so I'm working with my colleague Deanna Gilhood to basically just get all these amazing folks that have been doing great work in the region together, make sure we're kind of using that same language, and really just continue to build trust and say, hey, we're all trying to make sure that our region is prepared for the changes that are coming around our climate and weather. And really just continue those conversations. So kind of the big things that we're looking at are that increased regional coordination and really making sure that that planning process is collaborative, that all levels of kind of government, from townships to cities to counties to tribal nations are a part of the conversation. We don't get to the end of our planning grant in 2028 and people are like, hey, why didn't you include us? Also make sure we're really having an increased understanding of what the climate impacts are across the region. This is a pretty large region when you're looking at trying to create a climate resilience plan. It's amazing that the city of Duluth and the city of Grand Marais and Grand Portage and Bois Forte already have their own climate adaptation or climate resilience plans. But as a whole, it's a big region to be thinking about, okay, what are the impacts and then what are the solutions? And so we're definitely looking at things like coastal erosion, but we're also looking at kind of that inner part of St. Louis County and Bois Forte for wildfire risk. Of course, here in Cook County, a major concern. But even, I'll show you, increased summer temperatures are a pretty big concern. Not so much in Grand Marais or Cook County, but definitely you go 30, 40 miles inland, it will get much warmer in the summer. And then really making sure we're looking at all of this resilience in a lens of people, ecosystems, but also economy. We know that our changing climate is really impacting the way that people can recreate, but also can have jobs and how businesses operate. And so one of the things that we did is we know that there has already been great work happening in the region. There are already plans around transportation, around tourism, around watersheds that have been done. And so we looked at all of these plans, made sure we kind of highlighted what is already happening, and then saw not a ton, but a few gaps of making sure that that's what we really address. We are looking at some working groups with the umbrella of tribal sovereignty, and really making sure that we're focusing on what our partners, that those 17 organizations, are concerned about. And so the 5 main things were critical infrastructure, so buildings, transportation, roads, flooding, stormwater, and erosion, and then community health and well-being. That is one that I am leading. We have some great partners here in Cook County that are joining us on that. Northern forest resilience, and then energy sovereignty. So we have our working groups. One thing that we are kind of in this year 2 are really focusing on community engagement. And so back in January, we partnered with Grand Portage's Trust Lands and Emergency Management Divisions to actually host a community engagement event to really hear what are people concerned about. Yes, it's great to talk with the planners and the folks within tribal governance of what are you all doing, but it was really important for us to hear from just the general public of what are you concerned about, what are your hopes for the future. And so at the end of my presentation, I'll be sharing about an event that we'll be hosting here in Cook County with Soil and Water Conservation in April. So, a little bit of background. The Climate Adaptation Partnership is a project within the University of Minnesota and partners with Extension to really look at climate projections across the state and really help decision makers make sure they're ready for the changes that are coming. And so we've got great colleagues that are doing research just around climate science, but also specifically around hydrology and flooding, especially in the southern and western part of the state. But really doing a lot of detailed forecasting for the region. So, what has changed? This is not going to be anything new if you've lived in the region for even 10 or 20 years, but this often doesn't mean a whole lot, but Minnesota's average annual temperature has increased by almost 3 degrees in the last 130 years, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when we think about that, could be the difference of 29 to 32 degrees of just the impact that it's having, especially on our winters. Mm-hmm. But you probably have also heard that most of our warming is coming in the northern part of the state and in the winter. And so you'll look and see that winter lows have increased by about 7.5 degrees in the northern part of the state. Cook County, about 6.5 degrees, which again, doesn't seem like much, but when we're seeing that that's all winter long, that 6 degrees can really have a huge impact on what our snowpack is doing, what roads are doing for freeze and thaw.
Ticks.
Exactly, for especially whether it just be ticks or parasites in general of what can survive throughout the winter, things like spruce budworm. Yeah, exactly. Northeast Minnesota is also getting much wetter, so we're having increased precipitation, both rain and actual snow. This is a kind of a tricky one because I'll talk about our snowpack is really being drastically impacted. We're getting less sustained snow, but we are having storms that are producing larger snowfalls. And that's mostly just because of the amount of moisture that's in our atmosphere. So really, what are the current impacts? And again, if you live in the region, you'll know this, but some of the most extreme ones are some of our summer flood events. So June 2024 had a drastic impact throughout the region, but even here in Cook County, with upwards of about 3.5, even 4 inches in part of the county, having washouts of the only in or out to the region, and even impacts on the Pigeon River. And so this is kind of like when we talk about some of the greatest impacts to the state. I mentioned wildfire is a big one, summer temperatures, but flooding is probably going to be the most drastic impact we're going to have in the next 20 years. So flash flood risk, of course, but we really noticed it this past summer, about a year ago, of that air quality. So it's really hard to plan for poor air quality when it's not even happening in our region. It's happening well away from us, and And so this one is really what to do, and it's more about kind of that education of letting folks know, like, this is a day that we really have to change the way we're recreating, the way we're going about our business. And unfortunately, it is predicted to get more common, maybe not more severe, but more common, that we'll have air quality issues. As said, ticks, we're having new species of ticks showing up in the region and having definitely an increase in things like Lyme's disease. And I talked to some folks at the Department of Health for the state, and they said that's their biggest concern for not just Cook County, but Cook Lake and St. Louis, Carleton not as much, was that increased tick disease. Snow. Obviously, there's a lot of snow in the last few weeks here, but that sustained snowpack is definitely changing, and I'll show a little bit of what's projected in the region. And then just fish populations, some are going up, a lot are going down, as especially our inland lake temperatures are increasing. Definitely spruce bedworm, that's probably one of the biggest things I heard about in Grand Portage, and I've definitely seen that here in the region as well. Killing a lot of our spruce and firs, and then increased wildfire risk. Earlier ice out dates and not safe ice all year round. That's definitely something, that one's pretty hard to predict, but I do have some colleagues that are looking at winter lake temperatures and kind of that ice thickness. And then transportation issues. So this is outside of the county, but that June 2024 had huge impacts on rail and roads. And I just throw this in because people often ask, like, why do you care, Seth? So I grew up in Duluth. This is kind of a core memory, is the 2012 flood that had a huge impact. And I often use this image. Does anybody know what that is a picture of?
That's
So
from
this,
the Duluth Zoo.
yes,
Escaped,
so
right?
that is the seal that escaped out of the Duluth Zoo and was on Michigan Street. The polar bear also got out of its enclosure, but luckily stayed within the zoo. But that one event had a huge $100 million plus impact on Duluth, but it also really made the city change a lot of things and really plan ahead. And so there's actually been 2 more once in a 100-year flood events in the region that have not had as much of an impact because of things like large size and culverts and really preparation. So unfortunately, sometimes those extreme weather impacts kind of make us wake up and say, okay, we do have to plan for things like that. Okay, so really, what does the future look like? This is the important part of the presentation. So again, by the end of the century, this is a long time away, 70 years plus, but we just like to talk a little bit about, okay, so that average annual temperature, approximately 49 degrees. Okay, Seth, that number really doesn't mean much, but when we look at that historical average from 1995 to 2014, that's an increase of 11.5 degrees. So again, we're getting much warmer in the summer and definitely much warmer in the winter, having an impact, again, on our recreation, the way we can utilize cross-country skiing, snowmobiling, but also a huge impact on populations of moose, deer, wolves, our entire kind of forest system. Okay, again, northern Minnesota warming much faster, and this is kind of the thing that I think impacts me the most, is that especially up in Cook County, even in the next 20 years, so 2040, the start of this kind of prediction cycle, it's not that far away, but we could have up to 20 less days of a 6-inch snowpack. And when we think about just, again, that cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, yes, but also I've heard again and again that's a huge impact on our critical infrastructure, because if we don't have the snowpack and we do get a hard frost or hard freeze, it can really mess with our pipes. Even the roads are really being impacted. And so when I was just talking to Stephen this morning of like, okay, we used to say that if we had snow by Thanksgiving, it would stay all the way through April. Now we're getting these huge snows, it's melting, freezing, we're getting ice in a region that used to not be a huge challenge. So again, just to focus a little bit more specifically on Cook County, possibly up to 20 less days of snow cover over 6 inches. And then by the end of the century, Cook County, so again, we're going back to 70 years from now, could have almost an inch more of rain in a 2-day rain event, which sometimes this is like, Seth, why are you using this? Because that doesn't mean much, but just that inch of rain can really have an impact. And then up to 13 more days that reach above 90 degrees. And so this is kind of the really big thing because a lot of people in this region are not used to 90 degrees. Our infrastructure is not built. I grew up in a house that didn't have air conditioning. Many buildings, newer buildings probably do, but many older buildings in the region don't have air conditioning and starting to have a bigger impact on public health. I try to say that's a huge impact, but then when you look at the rest of the state, down in the southwest and western parts, you're getting 60 to 70 more days that are reaching above 90 degrees. So I think it's important just to be aware that as we get increased temperatures throughout the country and the state, it's possible people will again continue to look to northeastern Minnesota as a spot where they can get away from that heat, whether it's moving there or recreating in the region. So I always come to this point of like, try not to like depress people, but it's really important to just be informed and also just know that I think we're going to have changes. Some of them will be extreme. Some in this region, because of the lake, will not be as extreme as other parts. But just also to really think about, well, what are we already doing? And that's, I think, one thing I like to come to Lake Cook and counties and then Grand Portage because there are so many projects and so many folks that are doing great work. And to be in an area that declared a climate emergency back in 2022, the first in the nation, it just is really great to talk to partners with like soil and water conservation, public health, that are actively thinking about, okay, we're going to have more freeze thaw. We're going to have an increase in tick disease. And so it's not as reactionary as parts of Minnesota that I've worked in are really like, okay, we just had this horrible extreme weather event, now we're reacting. Cook County definitely seems to be kind of looking ahead. There's always more work to be done, but I just like to say thank you all for the support that you're already putting towards this. And just kind of give an example, this is, again, outside of Cook County. This is down right on the edge of Carlton, St. Louis, and Jay Cook State Park. From that 2012 flood, Highway 23 completely washed out. They now have put in a beautiful highway that they say will never be impacted. But again, of just like really, I think that's what's great about this collaborative is that folks are talking across the region. And so it's not Cook County having to do a lot of these projects on their own. They can learn a little bit, hey, this happened not that far away from an extreme flood event that I think there were about 12 inches of rain over the course of 24 hours. But just again, to kind of continue to have those great conversations. And I'll kind of end with, I mentioned that we are this Northland Climate Resilience Collaborative is partnering with Cook County Soil and Water Conservation to host that community engagement event. I know there's always so many wonderful things happening in Cook County, but just want to put it all on your radar that on Tuesday, April 21st at Studio 21, we are having kind of an open community listening session. So this is an opportunity for us mostly to hear. I will be doing a similar presentation, just, hey folks, here's what we expect to happen, but really an opportunity for us to hear what are you concerned about in your region? What are you hopeful for? And make sure that actually shows up in that plan. So we, again, don't get to 2028 and a bunch of people are like, you didn't think about this, you didn't talk to us. There will be a free meal. There will be some fun giveaways of Monoman, of wild rice. And then one of the things we're doing is also making sure that we're talking with folks with emergency management and making sure that folks are just kind of more aware of those extreme weather events that are impacting. And so one of the things is we'll have, I think everybody will get one of those NOAA weather radios that I've really seen as kind of a really important thing when you're entering the boundary waters anywhere really remote, as we've had more things like those derechos or extreme wind events and, of course, wildfires impacting the region. With that, I will wrap up and just say thank you again for the time. And I know you've all got a busy meeting, but if there are any questions, please let me know.
We did have a major flooding a couple of years ago down in the West End.
Yes.
Took out Township Road, and so now we have MnDOT working on resurfacing, so I've been attending those meetings to help them understand the importance of culverts ditching, that type of thing?
Yeah, and I know that even, I think this past summer, just past Graham Ray, we were seeing some of those upsizing of those culvert projects. And so that's another great thing to see is I've been hearing how concerned pretty much the whole corridor is of Highway 61 and just being worried of what could happen in, whether it be an extreme wind event, a bunch of trees fall, wildfire, or probably the highest risk of that flash flood. Yeah.
Cascade Bridge was within 2 inches of.
Yep.
So then we had to, we're working on alternate routes.
Yes.
How to get people to where they need to go.
Yeah.
Shut the road down.
Yeah.
At least the grade is open now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a scary situation, just information-wise. In the last 8 years, Cook County has declared local emergencies 5 times.
Mhm.
Previous to that, they hadn't declared since the 2012 flood.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you an idea of where we're heading. Of that 5, 1 was COVID.
Yeah.
The other 4 were weather-related, 2 in the spring and 2 in the fall. So we do get them fall that washed away a road in Grand Portage in 18 and flooded us here downtown in 19. So it's changing. You can tell it's changing. Yeah. And I'm involved with dog sled racing, and dog sled racing has traditionally a very short season anyway. You wouldn't think so in Minnesota because here we live in Minnesota, we always got snow, and we just haven't had that in the last. A lot of races have changed dates, postponed, tried to postpone, shorten their races. Like you said, it definitely has an impact on economically, but I mean recreationally too.
I was going to say, that is something we're trying to make sure we're incorporating in our plan as well, is just that cultural impact. It's something that doesn't always show up in like a planning document, but of the winter recreation being so core to the tradition and the values of the entire region, and we're still figuring out exactly how that shows up in a planning document, but just that's why those community engagement events are so important, of like really hearing what has been lost and what has changed, but what also some of those possibilities are. Yeah.
I had, just for your information, I had Ruth's job before she moved there, before I moved to the
Yeah.
county. And I'm a tribal member, so I always catch the tribal things, but is that map you had on your first slide, is the red line the actual 1854 ceded territory?
It is supposed to be. We have had a couple of talks that sometimes overlaying some of those, but it
Okay.
should be very close to. We had 1854 look at it. It was a map, I think, put together by somebody within GIS of St. Louis County, but it should be the exact overlay of the 1854
Oh.
treaty. And you'll even see there's like this tiny sliver, and I think it's Pine County. We are not working with Pine County, but the rest of the 1854 Treaty Authority, and they are part of our leadership team as well.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you
Yeah.
for coming here.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, that's depressing.
Yeah.
It's a very
On that note.
engaged group. I've attended a number of those, couple, 3 maybe, I don't know. And it's really impressive to see the people that are there and just what they bring to the table. It's,
Truth. They bring truth.
well, and experience and
reality.
innovation and, yeah, just there's a nimbleness there too.
So
And I
we're
think,
gonna-
you know, you look since 2022 when we declared the climate emergency, our highway department,
Oh, yeah.
invasive species, soil and water conservation district,
Otherwise.
Firewise, public health and human services have all taken on initiatives as a result of that changing climate and the extremes that we're seeing.
Well, good morning, Carson.
Good morning.
Thank you for bringing all these statistics.
Yeah,
It's nice
absolutely.
to see you updating though, too.
Yes, yep. Since I spoke with the HRA, actually, there's new census data, so that's always exciting. It doesn't change a ton in a lot of the data just because it's 5-year averages, so you're just swapping out one year for another, but it's always good to have the most up to date. All right. Yeah. Are you ready for me?
Yes, you
Yep.
do.
Okay. Perfect. All right. For those of you I have not met yet, I'm Carson Gorky. I'm the regional labor market analyst for Northeast Minnesota for the Department of Employment and Economic Development, also known as DEED. I was up here in January talking to the HRA about some of these same issues. I added in a little bit more of the demographic and workforce data, but still a lot of the housing information. So please ask your questions, but we'll dive right into
Carson
it.
is a self-proclaimed numbers geek.
I don't know if I self-proclaimed. People have called me the data guy. So workforce is kind of my wheelhouse, labor market, so wages, employment, those types of data, but working in a region where there's a lot of smaller communities that don't have maybe the resources like data shops that maybe bigger communities have. There's just been questions outside of workforce that have come my way that I've just kind of incorporated throughout, housing being the biggest one, childcare being another one. I know how to find census data, which can sometimes be difficult if you've ever tried to locate some yourself. The census website is not the easiest to navigate. So yeah, I've just kind of picked it up as I've gone. But Labor Market Information Office, centered down in St. Paul, part of DEED, we really try to inform both internally, so DEED, legislators, elected officials such as yourselves, and any organization or business or individual in Minnesota that can use socioeconomic data, economic data to make sound decisions. So that's our role, which I think works very nicely for a group such as county commissioners. This is what I'm planning to cover today, starting out broadly with those demographic population trends, a little bit on the industries in the county, and then diving into those housing trends and characteristics, and kind of how they relate to each other, the housing market and the labor market, because they are very, very closely intertwined. Population to start. I know some of you have seen these data before, but getting a rehash, I guess. It's been relatively flat over the last 4 years, so 2020 to 2024, which I think if you read a lot of the news, you might be surprised about, just like feeling like, oh, Northeast Minnesota has been like the magnet for a lot of the migration post-COVID, and that is true, and we'll talk about that, but maybe not to the extent that the perception, or like maybe the widely held perception conveys.
It's all second homes.
Second homes, yeah. So that is definitely part of it, because those people will not be counted in Cook County, and we will talk about that as well. So yeah, 29 people, which in any larger county would be kind of a rounding error, but it makes a difference in Cook County, So we make sure to talk about it. Population ranked out of 87, so pretty small county relative to the rest of the state. I'm sure you're all well aware of that. Kind of in the middle in terms of population change. And then the big one is, of course, the age, median age, 52.3 as of, I think it actually is 2024. That's almost 15 years older than the statewide median. And older than the regional median as well, but not the oldest in the state. Aiken, thank you.
Really?
Yeah, you guys know. You're close, yeah. Actually, Northeast Minnesota has, I think if I have this right, 4 of the top 10 oldest by median age in the state. So it's Aiken, Couchiching, Itasca. Actually, no, I don't think it's Itasca. Lake and Cook, which I don't know. Get some award for that, right?
Does that mean for the least willing to change?
I don't know. That we haven't done the causation on that. Okay, so 5,600 people approximately as of the last estimates. You can see how we compare to the rest of the region over that 2020 to 2024 period. a little bit slower than the regional change, but actually not as big of a decline as Lake or Couchiching. Couchiching has been on like a long-term decline. I don't make it up to Couchiching a ton, just because I don't have a ton of great contacts up there yet, but.
It's a whole other
Do you know how you interpret that?
Uh,
Change?
like why it's declining
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
A lot of it is some of the same trends that we see like in Cook, like aging as well, but I think there's just more out migration, which Cook does not have as
I mean,
much.
sometimes when you see change like that, it's due to an major industry that.
Well, paper has been slowing
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
so that's the big industry. But yeah, I'd have to look at the industry data to see
Because
if that's.
it's like here, when we look at the significant percentage of our economic stability is based upon tourism.
Mhm.
And if you find that, I mean, you could look at Ely, and if the significant contribution in the past had been mining, and you can look at Cooch and the paper
Yeah.
and the logging industry, when you have a major change in your industry, then it doesn't attract people to the area because there's no employment opportunities.
I certainly think that is part of it, yeah. Yep.
I haven't visited there often, but it's blown me away, just because you can, it's like palpable, the decline, I feel.
Oh.
But it's also, I feel like, just ripe for opportunity because it's so beautiful as well. It's just, they got a lot going for them, but it's not going for them yet.
Yeah.
You cross the border into Canada.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
That is
Next level?
very depressed.
Oh.
Yeah, very depressed.
Next level down,
Mhm.
okay.
But then you've had gold mining up, the way, and that has significantly changed. So it's, a lot of it is driven by the economic opportunities that exist. I think you find in Cook County that if you were to track our migration, the population that earns money elsewhere and now has reached retirement age is buying property up here. So it's not because they're drawn by economic opportunity as they are drawn to the region because of its aesthetic value.
Yeah, it's a different kind of story there. I think also Cook, and this is my own perception, has done a better job of marketing as a destination than Couchiching has too. But that's just my own take on it. Okay. This is from the State Demographic Center. So they do their own projections, and two of the biggest inputs into that are, of course, how many people we've had in areas, but then household size. And for Cook County, I just want to point out the gray bar. The household size, granted, this is from 2.17 down to 2.01, so not like huge absolutely. But when you add it up, that does play a role, especially in demand for housing. You have fewer people per housing unit. So you talk about, well, we have more housing units, how, in the same population, so how are we still short of housing, sort of thing. And this is one of the answers to that question. And that has been occurring throughout the state, but especially in rural areas. We talked about the aging population. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more because I think it's super relevant. So this is the change in the population by age group over the last 24 years. Youngest at the top, oldest at the bottom. And you can see, just kind of how the bulge shifted from 35 to 54, 24 years ago, and then kind of add 20 to each of those, and you see the bulge down now at 55 to 74, soon to be pushing into the 75 plus. The under 45 population down 12%. Just mention that because that is the current, half of the current workforce, like the prime workforce, we say 25 to, depending on who you ask, either 55, and the future workforce. And then you add in, I thought I had another, I do have it, it's on here. Yeah, 65 plus is now 30% of the population. And that is relevant to the workforce because when you hit 65, labor force participation declines pretty precipitously. But then it also impacts the services and goods that are demanded by an older population. I just spoke with a social gerontology course last week about basically that. And if you want, I can share that presentation with you as well. It was like an hour and a half of talking about that one trend. So this is just showing the projections again from Minnesota Housing Partnership and the Minnesota Demographic Center. The growth of the 75-plus population is occurring throughout the state, but you can see in northeast Minnesota, it's kind of concentrated here in the share that is going to be 75-plus. And it's tough to read, but that dark blue means that we'll have a higher than 15% of the population in Cook and Lake and Couchiching and Aiken over 75 years old as of less than a decade from now.
Heavy on the wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's value. You're just saying it's changing, but knowing how it changes and how it impacts things is all I'm saying. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying there's going to be more people over 75. And that will have some impacts for the workforce and population and
And the
economy.
types of services
Housing.
that are
Yep.
needed.
Yep.
And the types of housing.
My dad's 79, and he said he thinks he's not going to work this summer.
Yeah. For the first time
That's
ever?
not summer
or-
yet, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
it's not summer. Yeah, it can change.
Okay, migration
Any
is
idea how Aitken gets in there?
Aiken. Yeah, Aiken is a bit of a interesting case. So Aiken was the one county through most of the COVID period that actually added jobs and added to the labor force, despite being the oldest by median age in the state. And I don't know if I have an exact answer as to like how that happened, but yeah, it's a bit of an anomaly.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of the like lakes and resort kind of retirement draw. So maybe Aiken was just like a destination for that before a lot of other areas.
Makes sense.
But I don't have the data to
cheaper
support
where it
that.
was.
Yeah, and cheaper, yeah, more accessible to the metro area.
Proximity
That
distances
makes-
there.
The cost of living is a lot cheaper than say here.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
And they've got Pete and we don't. so.
Pete, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. So migration is another important factor when we talk about population. This is northeast Minnesota, so the 7-county area. You can see the benefit coming out of post-COVID if you think that in-migration is a benefit. So net positive migration both domestically in blue and internationally in orange. And we saw an increasing share of international migration into the region through 2024, but then we saw a pretty big step down in domestic migration into 2024. I imagine, I'm predicting, just with what we know, that 2025 will probably see a further decrease in both, but we'll wait to see what the data say. And then if you had to guess or haven't seen the slides yet, what would you think Cook looks like compared to this chart?
Over 14 years?
Yeah, I think it's the same period, yep. I guess more so, I'll focus you on the last 4.
I thought we said it was flat, but wait, migration.
And that flat that's net. So there could be ups and downs within that negative
I think
29.
the domestic would be up, but the international would be down.
You know, that is what I thought too.
Yeah.
And yes, for the first 2 years coming out of COVID, but then you actually had domestic out migration the last 2 years,
People
according
realize
to the
it
census population.
looks like
estimates.
heaven, and then you get here and you're like, wait, what are we doing?
And people, I actually
How
know
much
somebody.
does
I know
that
somebody
cost?
in
Where's
this
the movie?
this category here. So I know somebody that came up and then
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, maybe we can't make it work.
You know, the thing about statistics,
Yeah.
which are beneficial, but it's understanding how to interpret them
Yeah.
that makes them applicable.
Mhm.
And so we could look at that and make our assumptions, and the more that you refine numbers or you talk to people that are, we'll say, close to what the statistics represent, then you can apply it knowingly. And so you could say that if you want to look at this, we've got 2 things going on. We have people that earn their wealth elsewhere and coming up and buying to retire or buying second homes, and how they get reflected statistically compared to people who can no longer afford to live here that are leaving.
Yeah.
And so understanding those two things
It's vital.
tells you what that really represents.
Yeah, yeah, knowing the context locally, for sure, because again, the second homes is not going to be reflected in these data
Yeah.
necessarily. But longtime residents that can't afford to live here anymore would be
Yeah,
reflected.
and we see that, and if the other numbers aren't in there, then that's why I say
Yeah.
you have to have all of that in order to say what it actually means. Otherwise, you make your assumptions, but you got to prove that your assumptions are correct.
Yes, I agree with that, and I think, but coming in with my own assumptions, thinking like, oh, Cook County's
Yeah.
been booming with people
Yeah.
moving here, and then seeing that was like, oh, okay, there's something else going on
Healthcare.
here.
You get to a
That's what
certain
I've been hearing
age,
the most
you,
of,
you're
yep.
not gonna wait, take
People are
that trip.
moving to the Twin Cities or
Yep.
Duluth for
Availability, yeah, and that's not something that I necessarily thought about, yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, this is the net again, putting the two together. So natural change, which is births minus deaths, and then net migration, so in and out. Over the 4-year period, again, that population change right around 29, 30. And you can see that with just natural increase, it would be negative because we're having fewer people born in the county than are dying every year on average. And then that migration isn't quite enough over the last 4 years to offset that. But I think this is an interesting summary. Again, you have to know the context behind it, but it's a useful metric. IRS has migration data, which is very interesting and handy. There's some caveats to it, right? Like you have to have had a return to be counted. But they basically say you filed your return in this county in 1 year, and then you file it in another year, so they're able to track people that way, or you file it in the same county, you haven't moved. The big takeaways here is that, well, first of all, it's only available through 2022, because it takes them a long time to analyze these data. But at that point, when we were seeing that big increase from previous information, we were seeing gains from a lot of places. The biggest gain was from Hennepin County, which may not be a surprise. That's where the increase of returns grew the most. Other places in the state. But we did see growth across most areas. The only place we didn't see like an increase in the number of people or returns moving to the region was from the south. So, but there weren't a lot of people coming from the south anyway. And then to the point about second homes, but also the people that are moving here permanently. So returns indicates that your residence is here. Also had higher incomes. So the people that are moving here for second homes most likely have higher incomes, but so do the people that are planning to relocate here. Also had higher incomes. I think it was the returns, so the average gross income per return for in-migrants in 2022 was $88,000 or $89,000. That's compared to $74,000 for non-migrants. So, about $14,000 difference. Okay, into the labor market stuff. So this is unemployment rates on the left by what we call workforce service areas. So if you're familiar with the Workforce Development Board for Northeast Minnesota, has anybody sat on here, been on the board? You've been on the board too? Yeah, okay. Yep, so that would be the 7-county area outside of Duluth, which is this workforce service area. And Northeast Minnesota tends to have higher unemployment rates, especially in the winter months, just due to the seasonal nature of the industries we have here. We have an industry mix that is more cyclical. As you're well aware of in Grand Marais and Cook County in general. Duluth is a little bit different from that, doesn't have as many peaks and troughs in the seasonal cycle, but does still kind of live on that tourism seasonal cycle. So this is the latest data we have for the end of last year.
Look how high it gets in, say, Aiken County.
Yeah, pretty high. So you have a big labor, like the labor force grew there, but unemployment, you've got 10% of the population. Part of that is the older population. The older folks that are in the labor market tend to have a little bit higher unemployment in that county, but usually it's much lower because the people that are in the labor market that are older are like, we're working or we're just out of the labor market. That's the typical trend. This is the labor force, which is defined as either employed, so in a job, or having looked for work in the last month. That's what the technical definition of unemployment is. So the blue line represents the total labor force in Cook County, according to DEED, over the last 20 years. You can see it's been a kind of a slow decline. That largely reflects the aging population. So as you have a higher share that is past the retirement age, the labor force tended to decline a little bit with that. You see COVID played a role, but the labor force has grown slightly in the last couple of years. Unemployment hit a historic low in 2020, what is that, 2? And has been growing since. That's a statewide trend too. We've seen that kind of bounce back to pre-COVID times. Northeast Minnesota, I think, has unemployment now that is higher than it has been in 2019.
But I'm surprised a little bit because of the trends that the state demographer was putting out there for the labor force was not gonna, the age of it is not gonna grow, right, for another 10
I have to
years?
see that. Yeah, I don't.
Just because of the boomers.
Yeah, like staying in or leaving the labor force.
I'm sorry?
So you said that the projection is that the labor force age is not going to grow, or the labor force itself?
The labor force itself because of boomers
People leave.
retiring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And that, yeah, that impacts our employment projections, like everything that we think about.
Well, I would
too.
just would assume that unemployment
It would go
stayed
down.
lower because of
Yeah.
that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that has more to do with the loosening the labor market than it has to do with the aging trends.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And when we talk about loose or tight labor markets, largely what I'm referring to is this ratio of job vacancies, so the blue bars, to job seekers, which is estimated unemployed individuals. So you can see since the Great Recession in Northeast Minnesota, we had 11 job seekers for every single job vacancy. And then that ratio, the black dot, has come down to a low below 1 pre-COVID, spiked a little bit during COVID, and then hit even lower points when it was super tight. I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, when it was like impossible.
That's what I thought was for another 10 years. I just thought it was going to be that.
I also kind of thought it was going to linger for a little bit longer, but it appears to be loosening up. We don't have the job vacancy data for Minnesota yet for 2025, but all the national data are starting to point at fewer job vacancies and more unemployed individuals. So this ratio that we have here, the black dots, getting close to, if not over 1, I would say, in 2025.
How is that influenced by retirement? In other words, how is retirement reflected when you look at the baby boom population and the number that are moving out of the workforce? If that's calculated or if it skews the findings, the other portion of that would be to look at what percentage of the population is moving towards subsidy, meaning that they are no longer employed, but they are living on assistance.
Yeah, I don't know about the latter part. I know that it's counted, but I don't know necessarily how it would impact this ratio. I know that people retiring, that creates job vacancies, like that creates demand for labor. So you're going to have a lot of retirements in the next decade that are going to create job openings, so demand for labor. So
when you look at demographics, it's the same way when you look at demographics relative to birth. You can look internationally and see where you're seeing in what we'll say ethnic groups or whatever that you're having populations, that the birth rate is still ahead of the death rate. And if you look at our demographics, that the birth rate is completely dropped off the map relative to more people are dying than we're replacing.
are you talking
those
about
people.
Cook specifically or
No, I'm
nationally?
just talking as a general, in the state of Minnesota.
State of Minnesota, okay.
Yeah, state of Minnesota. And so, and being on the Job Corps, when we were looking at what was happening with employment and people that needed to retool, or people that found that, well, gee, I'll just go on benefits. And then they're out of the workforce. So when you look at what we're seeing in the workforce, the employment relative to the number of people now have shifted to being supported through some subsidy. That's an interesting comparison. But if you look at the number in recent years, nationwide, it's accelerated, and that amount of money that it costs overall to support the increase in that subsidy
Yeah.
is unbelievable. In other words, we've seen such a spike in that.
Are you familiar with the old age dependency ratio? Like, it's one way of measuring that. So how many individuals do you have over the age of 65 relative to the 16 to 65,
Yeah.
like the working age, more typical working age?
Which is a social security issue.
Yeah.
Who's funding it?
Yes, and may not be a surprise given what I've showed you before, that the old age dependency ratio in Cook is one of the highest in the state.
Yeah.
So it's just a way like to enumerate that relationship and like need of an older population relative to the working population that ostensibly is supporting that. Yeah. Okay, overall jobs. So this is the total employment trend, and this will just be covered employment. We call it covered because it's covered by unemployment insurance. So this won't include self-employment, which is a larger than average share in Cook counties. Yep, more people working for themselves. But this is one of the best most accurate data sources we have because it comes from administrative data from employers filing their unemployment insurance reports. Jobs remain about 250 below the 2019 levels, which in a small county where your total employment is 2,600, that 10%, 9% of employment. It has grown slightly the last couple of years, but declined over the last year into 2024. So depending on how you measure it, whether that you want to reach that 2019 level or whether you feel like there's a new equilibrium. It seems like the new equilibrium has been kind of the case in other places in Northeast Minnesota. Duluth has not reached pre-pandemic levels. There's only a couple of areas I think that have. I think maybe Itasca, maybe Aiken. So, and when you go into the quarterly trend, you can see the seasonal nature of employment in the county. There's not peaks like this in most other counties in the state. And the Q3 employment, which is the peak here, is about 12% above the annual average every time. So, 12% more jobs in the summer months, just showing you what you already feel and know. Q1 about 8.4% lower. Don't really need you to absorb all of the numbers in here, but when you want to look at it later, this is the industry data, the sectors. The most recent data we have is for Q3 2025, so doing like the 4-quarter average ending in Q3. Top industries, as was mentioned, accommodation, food services, retail trade is up there, but accommodation, food services is the biggest one. Those top 3, so accommodation, food services, which is hotels, restaurants, bars, public administration, which is government, and retail, they account for about 55% of all the jobs in the county, covered jobs.
I had looked at a statistical report last night, and it was Cook County Economic Vitality is percentage of jobs 2024, and the breakout was tourism, arts, and recreation was 23.1% of our workforce.
Okay.
And the resource extraction, which could be mining, farming, logging, things like that, was 2.1%, which is the lowest.
Mm-hmm.
And the self-employed that you referenced earlier was nearly 30%. It's 29.6 to 1/3 of our population.
What's the source of that report that you have?
Normally I would put it down on this. The other thing is that government is 31.5%. And if you look at the percentage of jobs in government, according to the 2024 report, we are 79, Cook County is 8. In other words, there's 79 counties that have fewer people
smaller
employed
share
in government.
Yeah, yep.
But the number 1 is Monoman.
Mm-hmm.
and that's 53.8%. And if you look at, let's see, I took Lake as a comparative. Lake is 22.6.
Yep.
Cook is at 31.5.
Part of that is tribal governments. So tribal government will be counted under public administration too. So you see a lot of the counties that that have like, yeah.
And so when you're looking at the public versus the private, I mean, you would have your schools, you'd have your hospitals, you'd have your tribal. And so when you put all of those together in there, that's how that figures.
Yeah,
out.
it depends on how you count it. So, like healthcare, the way we count it is what the like business establishment does.
Yes.
So a hospital will be counted under healthcare and social assistance, even if those people are employed by a government.
Yeah.
And public administration is more like what happens in the courthouse. So it's not necessarily, like it's not the educational part. Like the educational services will count the teachers, even though they're employed by the district, a government agency, right?
Yeah.
They'll be counted under educational services.
And this is an important point in breaking out statistical information, is that if you break them out by category as opposed to umbrella underneath that, to understand that. Because then that information could be applied more strategically, but in the case when you're just saying, how many are funded through tax dollars?
Yeah, yep. And, I could break it out by actual government jobs too.
Yeah.
This is just
Sure.
which sector they're in.
Administrative or-
Yep.
Yeah,
But you just you need to know how to ask the question,
Yeah.
which hopefully I'm helping you
When we
with.
have Border Patrol, we've got the Forest Service,
Yep.
we've got
Oh,
the DNR,
yes.
so
Yeah,
that's
and
a
rural areas
lot.
tend to have a higher share of public administration or government jobs, especially in northeast Minnesota. Like, think about all the roads. We still have a lot of roads, like more road mile per resident that has to be maintained. That's just one example.
The average annual wage is also very interesting, that 47,000 is our Cook County's average,
Covered
at least
employment.
in
Yep.
2025.
2020, yeah, like the 4-year, the 4-quarter average, yep. And that's lower than the regional wage, but only by like 1,000 or 2,000. So it's not like that much lower.
And so, and then if we apply the household size, could we say the average household wage is?
We do have the
Okay.
median income,
Okay.
yeah, household income, which is better measured by the Census Bureau than via the wages, yep. Great question, though. This is just how it's changed from 2019 Q3 to 2025 Q3 by sector. The big loss there, it's hard to read, is accommodation and food services, hit especially hard by COVID. Arts, entertainment, and recreation as well, retail trade. So those three on the left is kind of like the core of the tourism sector in northeast Minnesota, or in Cook County. And then the big green addition over there is actually real estate, rental, and leasing. Theory is that some of the jobs from the far left have actually just moved to real estate, rental, and lease, like short-term rental, as opposed to hotels. So maybe not a full loss of those jobs, more of a transfer from one sector to the other.
You know how that compares with Aiken?
I do not know how that compares with Aiken.
That'd be interesting. I mean, when we make our assumptions as to who's comparable, if you look at Cooch, you look at Aiken.
Yeah.
You could look at Lake. But again, the nature of the economy that exists in those areas. But I think Aiken County is comparable on a lot of different things.
I haven't made that direct comparison, but it would be interesting to see. Yes, and so many of the tourism-oriented sectors down. Some other point I wanted to make. The highest paying sectors: healthcare, public admin, finance and insurance is relatively small, but healthcare, public administration more prevalent. Yes. Okay. The migrant workforce. I don't think you can talk about Cook County necessarily without talking a little bit about the migrant workforce, just because it plays such an important role, especially in the season, busy seasons. H-2B and J-1 primarily. Is everybody pretty familiar with the programs? Okay, great. much larger share of the workforce in Cook County relative to pretty much the rest of the state. We have H-2B data through 2026, like even through the beginning of 2026. The J-1 data, which used to be available, I couldn't find. I think they took it down from their website. I sent them an email, and they were like, they gave me a very boilerplate response. So I was like, okay, you don't have it. I got it. Please file a FOIA request. I'm like, no thanks. I don't have 4 years. Yeah, so not surprising, most of it's in accommodation, food services, and then the occupations, food prep and serving, building and grounds, cleaning and maintenance, and personal care. So just those tourism supporting jobs. And if you add, so assuming that J1 is kind of the same level that it was in 2022, maybe a little bit lower because you've seen the pretty big drop off here in H2B, could be as high as about 10% of the workforce if you add H2B and J1 together. So pretty big footprint. Okay, transitioning into housing. Housing in the workforce or housing in the labor market, it's tough to read there a little bit, but this is the Federal Reserve asked, I think 2 years ago, like how much of a challenge, we're asking job seekers, how much of a challenge are each of the following factors to your job search and employment goals? The top ones are kind of employer oriented, so like the job doesn't offer enough money. That's kind of been the main challenge for as long as I've been in this job, and I'm sure a lot longer. Lack of wage offer on job postings, that actually has started to change with pay transparency laws. But down in the bottom with other obstacles, affordability and availability of housing where jobs are. That's the big one. Childcare is down there as well. And then asking respondents, what are the significant barriers? So kind of a similar question, but a little bit of a different tack to it. And affordability of and availability of housing is, again, up there in the top responses. And I will argue that rural demographic trends also, like aging population, they impact, as we've talked about, the labor market and housing dynamics kind of at the same time. Like as you're exiting the labor force, maybe you're looking to change or downsize your housing at the same time. So in some ways, it's kind of like a double whammy, or the impacts are just happening at the same time. So rural areas are kind of feeling those, I think, more acutely. And then when you think about the housing availability, jobs, like if the housing is not near where the job is in a rural area, it's kind of like, well, you can't just go to the suburb over and look for housing. If it's not there, people are not going to move there. And we've seen that over and over again. A lot of employers I've talked to trying to get folks to move up to the region have had that exact experience. They agreed to the job, and then they looked for a house for a couple months, couldn't find it, and said, sorry, I'm actually not going to be able to accept that offer. And I just added the 15% of households are 65-plus-year-olds living alone. I might need to update that, but as of like a year or two ago, that was the case. In that social gerontology class, I updated some of the data, and that number is actually decreasing. I would have thought it would have been increasing, the number of 65-year-olds that are living alone, but is going the opposite direction pretty clearly.
And what do you attribute that to?
I think it might just be like either a necessity or like a cultural change. Either you can't afford to live alone, or the like loneliness, and you see the value in community. I think it's probably a combination of the two.
We have, my wife and I manage Section 8 housing, and in this community, a lot of the people that are coming in are people that can no longer manage,
like physically
the maintenance
managing,
issues,
yeah.
everything else, and so it's the downsizing
Yep.
component.
Yeah.
You see it, they're trying to do it while they're active to make that transition, because it makes it easier.
Yeah. And they would technically still be listed as living alone if they're in a unit in a like apartment building.
Okay.
So that would be more like roommates would be the case there,
Yeah.
which is even more interesting to me.
We don't have roommates.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that.
I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah. Okay, so the Northeast Minnesota, just kind of a summary slide on the housing characteristics. how many units we have, what share are single unit. We have a higher share of single detached units in Northeast Minnesota relative to the state. Occupied versus the state, also a smaller share. Only about 3/4 are defined as occupied, which we'll go into some detail on. And then the age of the housing. Relative to the state, we have a higher share that have been built since 2010, which is interesting relative to the rest of Minnesota. And then the median value is quite a bit lower, almost about 100,000 lower than the state. And then the median rent is also a bit lower.
That's Northeast
That's
Minnesota.
Northeast.
Yeah.
not Cook
That's
County.
not
because
Cook, right?
we-
Oh yeah, Cook County, here you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So some things same, like relative Northeast Minnesota to the state, but big thing is the median value is actually higher in Cook County than it is in the state. And total units, that actually went up. So the 5-year, the 5-year average just moved up a year, and that total housing unit estimate moved up, but mostly from additional vacant units. So you've got like an increase in housing units, but more so vacant units. And as we'll talk about, they're not like just sitting there empty all the time, but second homes, essentially.
Where do the rent values come from?
Yeah, so this is always a question that comes up. So there is a formula that the census applies, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but almost always people think it's too low, like it doesn't represent.
Oh, yeah.
And part of it is because this is 5 years in the past.
Sure.
So especially when you have housing costs rising really quickly, it's always going to look like it's too low. But it's like typical, and I think it is for a 2-bedroom. So it's not, it's,
Really too low.
Yeah.
Way too.
yeah. So I've just shown you what the data are, but every time I put that up there, it's always pointed out.
What I can tell you is that
Yeah.
HUD sets a rate based upon their evaluation of an area.
Yeah.
And so, right now, for a 1-bedroom, HUD will not, in other words, you can't charge a rate higher than $888 for a 1-bedroom. That's, HUD sets that.
Yep.
And my response to is that your figures are not reflective of what the reality
market.
is in Cook County.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the HUD values are probably a little bit more timely than the census ones, but they are also informed by the census. So
Yeah,
they kind of play
I
off
just
each
think
other.
that it's too broad-based in its analysis is the problem with it.
yeah, they have formulas that are.
And then
very
the
general.
other thing is that, so you get a posting, it'll say, this is how much you can make in order to qualify for subsidy.
Yeah.
And that rate, when you look at in our area, and then what the rent is, that somebody can make that amount of money and qualify based upon that standard, how much money do you make? But when you look at our rate, those two work together and it cancels out a lot of people, which makes it just not affordable.
And then you get into this thing called the benefit cliff. I don't know if you've heard about that. So they have an incentive to not, if they want to keep that
Right,
housing,
exactly
to not
right.
make more than
Yeah.
whatever that cap is.
So you have people come in and they say, well, you could do it if you want to quit one of your jobs.
Yeah.
And all we're doing is we're pushing people into not being resourceful, and then they become a burden on society, which is a true reality if you try to adjust things so that you're no longer a contributor, so that you can live off of the benefit.
I'll push back just a little bit on that specific scenario,
Yeah,
because people are going to act rationally, right? They want to keep their housing, so they're just acting. They want to keep their housing, and they have to decide: do I want to, get this raise at work and lose my housing, especially in a county
I know,
like
but
here where you can't
it's the
find
system.
housing?
I'm not going to say it's the individual.
No, I agree.
It's the
I agree.
system.
I agree. I agree.
Because if I look at it and I say, you're gonna have to quit a job, otherwise you won't qualify. So we force the person to have to quit a job in order to qualify, and that's what
Or
I'm
take a
saying.
job that pays lower,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
yeah.
The
Yep.
same with healthcare.
Yeah, no, it is, it's just,
That vacancy. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Northeast Minnesota, we talked 22% vacant units. So what do we mean when we say vacant? So when they're doing this survey, it means that the housing unit is vacant if no one is living at the time of the interview. So interview now can be like you get a letter, right? Or you get an email. So in the past, it used to be like they would call or go to the house, but and entirely occupied by persons that have a residence elsewhere. So that would also count as vacant, and that would be the primary situation in Cook County or Northeast Minnesota. And then units that are not yet occupied are classified as vacant. So if they're just built it, or someone just moved out and someone's about to move in, or it's about to rent, things like that, that'd be counted as vacant. But those are all really small shares relative to just, it's a seasonal recreational second home. And you can see how Cook stacks up the highest share among the counties. Over half of the housing units are deemed vacant in
Is
Cook
that
County.
Virginia? That's middle St. Louis County? White?
That's white.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be,
Hibbing?
no, I think that's Mount Iron.
okay.
Yeah, Virginia's a little bit further. And then Hibbing is the bigger one right on the border of St. Louis.
Okay.
So, I mean, when you take that statistic, and you look at, say, so what does that tell us? If those, if the tax rate of those vacant homes is higher than the tax rate of the people that are in residence, then it's not affecting your revenue, but it can affect
Affect a lot else, yeah.
a lot of things
Yeah.
locally. But if we look at it and say that, for instance, that vacant homes or short-term rental or whatever are at a lower rate than others,
Then it could be,
then
a
it would be
drag
a
on your
big
revenue.
thing. So
Yep.
it's understanding.
Is that the case in
The
Cook County?
correlation. It shouldn't be. I know we're working to try to do something with the homestead and with our short-term rentals so
It's
that
about
we.
where that money goes.
Okay,
It's about where that money goes, whether it goes locally or to the general fund.
okay,
And currently, that money goes to the general fund,
okay. That's
not
interesting.
to the
No.
school district. That's
that-
what we're trying to do.
Interesting, okay. And then the seasonal, breaking it out, the seasonal recreational vacancies. The purple there is the seasonal recreational or occasional use. So this is the share of your vacancies broken out by type, basically. Cook is only behind Aiken, so your point of comparing to Aiken, yeah. They got a lot of vacant units down there as well. But yeah, this is just like the big thing that jumped out at me when I was looking at the housing in Northeast Minnesota. It's kind of the story. And then this is that number of occasional recreational or seasonal units by census tract. And I think maybe I need to update this, but it's about 1,600 in the dark purple, 445 in the Grand Marais area, and then like the Grand Portage is about 1,000. It's like the breakout by census tract. Oh, there you go.
So the impact, I mean, in these last two slides, I mean, if you draw your assumptions, is that we have seen, I mean, if you want to look back and you want to see the shift in how many, you know, from homestead to what we've got right now is seasonal recreational.
Yeah.
That what happens is if the people that are buying the seasonal recreational have earned their wealth elsewhere, and then they are buying up the homes that would normally be the residential homes that people can't afford, and then the young people generationally can't afford to live here. They got to move out to get and earn their wealth elsewhere.
Yeah.
And what that does, that drives the price up. And so when somebody wants something up here, they will make an offer that can exceed what the asking price is just because they want it, but they got the money to do it. And we see that we're mushering out what's happening with our typical residential homes.
Yeah, there's a widening gap.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That becomes problematic. And, you know, how you manage that is the decisions you make.
I think this is kind of what you're talking about. You've seen over the last decade and a half, just as has value as a proxy for that, for like price. The median home value grew 42% from 2012 to 2024, but 39% from 2017 to 2024. So it basically hockey sticked in the last 7-10 years.
And I think it's like 420
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so even more. So that, yeah, again, this is a
Yeah.
5-year average, right?
Yeah, it is.
And median gross rents have actually not grown as much as that, which is interesting, maybe because partially.
And what's the year of this?
This is 2020 to 2024. So
I mean, with our new rental properties, if you want to look at what that median is right now, that would
Might be
definitely
higher,
change.
yeah. Yep, but they rose on this same measurement scale 28% relative to 39% in owner occupied. This is the breakout by, so owner occupied units by how much the, is it value? Yeah, value, sorry. Okay, so value of the owner occupied units by bracket. And the big one to point out is you've got higher shares of the 100,000 to 200,000, but then also over 500,000 in value, which that's the trend that we kind of were pointing out before.
Previous slide that you had, it would be interesting to see by county, I mean, we'll say similar county, Aiken certainly being one of them, but in tourist-heavy counties, the increase in that median price of home.
For sure, yeah.
What the
yeah.
percentage we compared to those other counties that have the similar type of.
Yeah, you would see the same trends for,
economic
yep,
vitality.
yep.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the?
What this is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
so it's,
point
me.
that-
Sorry, I was jumbling it. It's the estimated value of owner-occupied housing, so owned housing, and this is by, like,
By the value.
by the bracket, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then I'd have Minnesota in the green there, just to show the comparison, that there's a higher share in the 100,000 to, I think it's actually, yeah, we'll say 200,000. So like relatively affordable-ish housing, depending on the quality of the housing there. That's not shown in here. And then much higher share of the million or more housing. So that's just showing the type of unit that is available here relative to the state. It's just another way to look at the bifurcated housing market that seems to be occurring.
Yeah, the problem with that is that, I mean, just at first glance, is that we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples.
Well, when you're comparing to Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying that somebody comes up here and they think, well, I've got this much money, I'm gonna buy a house, and oh my goodness, this is what I get for this amount of money.
Mhm.
That's the problem.
Yep.
Or
That's
they
why I
say,
mean- That's why I
this
mean.
only
Well-
buys me a septic system?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it could not go as far. Like the median value is higher than the statewide. So if you have like a, I don't know, like a similar, like a 4-bedroom house in Roseville or something like that, like it might be more expensive to buy that same house here, I would argue.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's my point.
That's what your point. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, my
I was
point is
misinterpreting.
that what you get
Okay.
for that same amount of money in Cook County,
Gotcha.
and that's why people are surprised, that, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
But
okay.
that's what I gotta
Yes.
pay in order to be here, so then they pay it.
I'm on the same page. But the median household income is about 16,000 less. So you've got like same price of housing as the rest of the state, but the income is, so that's where that gap is starting to form, or is, and is getting wider. Okay, median home value a little bit more. I think this is maybe my last median home value slide. The one that I wanted to point out, we've already showed the median home value, is actually this one, which I showed at the HRA. So this is average residential homestead estimated market value in the blue in Cook County, and then the residential homestead effective tax rate. So the effective tax rate has actually gone down since 2020 as the value has grown hockey stick wise the last 4 years to 424, what you said. So this kind of points out that phenomenon you were talking about earlier. You have a higher, like they're paying taxes, like even with these occupied part of the year units, right? So they're still paying taxes to the point where the actual tax rate has gone down for everybody. So that's one benefit.
Yeah, the only thing is that you cannot separate tax rate and median price.
Gotcha.
And so if you take a low tax rate times a high
Yeah, and that's,
price, you're gonna end up paying more.
this is
than if you-
more, so this is
Yeah.
more of, to your point, this is more a reflection of a high price than it is, or high value than it is of people paying absolutely lower. Yeah, yeah. Mortgage rates starting to creep down slightly, but still around 6%. But, you know, a few percentage points can make a difference in freeing up people that weren't going to sell their homes or move.
Well, it would be really helpful, I think, for even longer perspective, because they're exceptionally low for.
Yeah, so if I showed
2008 or
10,
something.
yeah,
or-
10 or 12 more years. Yeah, I chose the 5-year. I could have chosen the full one, but it's just easier to see the 5-year.
Well, I
But
mean,
you're
this
right.
is- This is super helpful. I just, personally, I think about that, but I haven't had that visual. like,
Yeah.
how
But
does-
I'm not sure how many, especially maybe first-time home buyers or like new home buyers are looking like, oh, my rate is only 6% when it was 14% when my parents bought their first house. Like, I don't know how many people think like, oh, I got a great deal. They're like, no,
Right,
it's
right.
it's 6%, and 4 or 5 years ago it was 3%. I think that's probably a more common comparison.
I got a buddy that has 1.9. What?
He's not selling, right?
Well, see, that's the thing, yeah. So it can play a big role in supply as well. This kind of confusing graph is just trying to put together the main drivers of affordability. So sales prices, taxes, property insurance, income, and how they interact with each other to affect affordability by metro area. It's just kind of a fun visualization. So income has actually been rising to the relatively fast in the Duluth metro. So this isn't Cook necessarily, but it's just showing something regionally. So income has actually been a pull up on affordability, so making it more affordable. And more recently, so have mortgage rates, but then pulling it down have been taxes, property insurance, and sales price. So.
Oh, I see.
So lower is less affordable, higher is more affordable on this chart. And this is just a more simplified version of that. It's just median income, how that's been growing, and then the qualified income so that you're paying 30%. So if like the median household income is 30% of the median sales price at the time, that's basically comparing those two. You can see blue line is getting further and further underwater relative to what would be needed to purchase the median home price. Yep. You want the blue line to be above the orange line. It becomes unaffordable for most if the blue line is below the orange line.
Well, that's Duluth, Wisconsin. That was a large.
Yep, Duluth, Wisconsin, yep. Into supply, and I'm over my time, aren't I? Okay, I'll speed up to finish it. Okay, so there's just authorized housing units, and this is private, so this won't include the new HRA developments. But you can see kind of the longer-term trends in Cook County and Minnesota. Cook County's followed the state in terms of housing authorizations, which is interesting to see. So those are kind of statewide trends. Housing burden, the main takeaways here. So the housing burden as defined by the Census Bureau is if you're spending more than 30% of your household income on housing. So that's rent plus utilities, like associated costs, 35%, sorry. And Cook actually has a smaller share than other counties, but above the Northeast average for owner-occupied. 20% of owner-occupied housing or units are deemed to be housing burdened, so 1 out of 5.
Your statement lower, on this chart, it's lower than Aiken, but that's the only one.
Yeah.
If I look at 87.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yep,
Yeah,
sorry. Itasca, I think, at the last measure, and maybe Lake. So that might have switched. I think Lake used to be higher than Cook as well. But good catch. And then this is renter occupied. maybe you can help me understand a little bit why Cook is so much lower in terms of renter occupied housing burden.
We haven't had it, plus housing that could be used for short-term rental.
Is used
I mean,
for that.
is used for short-term rental, not long-term.
So it's just, they're just so few, is that
Yeah.
the?
I was gonna say compassion.
Yeah, well, that'd be a good reason.
What do you mean?
Personally, we've kept rents lower to try to encourage families to be there, even though the market would demand more.
Yeah.
And we can be more selective for who we want in there, and so, you know, we've had single moms, and,
Are you talking in the private sector? You're
Yeah.
talking like in
Private
you know,
sector.
businesses that have rental properties?
Well, both will be impacting this, but if you have a sizable share of
Right.
folks that are doing, as you say,
Yeah.
that'll show up in
Yeah,
these
like-
data.
And,
Yeah,
and
that's
there's
what
an
I'm saying, it would have to be other than.
Yeah, and so I think there is some of
Yeah.
that, but then also businesses that own rental properties that want to, for employees. Yeah, they
employees.
need to keep that there so they can have their employees,
Right.
but the employees have to afford it,
Right.
so it's just a strange dynamic there too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No,
I think that's
those
part
are
of it.
things that I did not think about, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
It's sort of Johnny Cash's song,
Which one?
Company Store.
Ah, gotcha, yeah. This is how the burden has changed over time. So blue is renters, the share of renter households that were, paying more than 35%. The share of owners with mortgages in orange that have paid more than estimated 35%. And it's actually gone down relative. I think that has more to do with the income rising than it has to do with lowering costs of housing. But I still was surprised to see it come down. Renters is about the same as it's been over the last decade plus. But how, like, those with mortgages has come down. That could be rates. I don't remember exactly what rates were in the 2013, 2017, but, yeah. And one last thing on the housing burden. So this is the housing costs. You can see that those without mortgages have the lowest costs on the right. How that's changed over time. It's jumped up quite a bit from 2013, 2017 average to the 2020, 2024 average. So that would include like your utilities and everything. But as you said, it's probably higher across the board. Yeah, in reality. And then I've got two more slides. So Lake Superior Area Realtors represents a larger area than just Cook County, but includes Cook County. They have a measure of affordability too, an index, which is super handy, and it has gone down. That is the big takeaway, to pretty historic lows as long as they've been tracking it. So it's tough to see, but under 100 means that the median household income of the area is insufficient to qualify for the median price home. So it's a kind of a more local version of that other chart I was showing you with the orange and blue lines. And then a median sales price has been like quite a bit of fluctuation as it's gone up, but the trend has been up in median
That's like-
sales price.
It's a periodic fluctuation, like, that's very interesting.
It is kind of interesting, yeah.
When to sell and when to buy, right? That's.
Yeah, I was like, if I had known this existed when we were buying our house, I'd been like, I don't know, let's wait a few months. But you can dig into it. They actually have these reports available to the public, which is pretty cool. I don't know if they know that it's available to the public, but I bookmarked it, their Google Drive, so I guess it's open. But it's just cool to see. And then the kind of summary slides here is just the affordability gap. The Greater Minnesota Partnership put together this a couple years back. So like I say add 10+% to all of these figures to make it relevant to today's costs. But the top is, okay, the affordability for a new labor force. So that's the entering the workforce. They want to buy a home, right? Like what they can afford with their starting wages. That's the blue bracket. The purple bracket is what the typical cost of a starter home would be, that like range. Notice that there's not a ton of overlap there. That's kind of the point. And then what it costs to build a starter home. The takeaway is that those three things are not there's no overlap there. So how can you afford a starter home? Vanishingly few families can. And then low rents, so the median rent in a rural area, which you talked about, and then the rent needed to support a multifamily housing development. There's a gap there too. And then on the bottom, talking about the cost of renovations. What you appraise the old home that hasn't been maintained for decades, and what that appraises for, and then what it would cost to get it up to standard, and that also would maybe not be economical. So I really like this graph. It's a good summary of the challenges facing rural housing development.
Can we go back?
Yes.
What's that the bottom one again?
Yeah, so that is basically saying that the lower values of substandard homes, like homes that have fallen into disrepair, or,
Yeah.
and then the cost of renovations makes them a poor investment for families and creates
Yeah.
significant challenges for banks looking to lend on this type of loan.
After this, it just seems.
So you basically say like the cost to renovate a home to get it to a point where the family would want to live in it is not like financially feasible
Right.
from a bank's perspective,
Right.
and from a
It's
family's
backwards,
perspective.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not even, doesn't even make sense to.
This is talked about, the one on the bottom, the bottom one is talked about probably the least of these three. It's more so like building starter homes,
Yeah.
or can they afford rent in an area?
Yeah, it's up to the top one too, just that green versus like, why would you build a home if it's gonna be worth less than?
Yeah, well, and
What is-
just what can people pay to afford that? Like, if you're building a starter home, your audience is people that are entering or your target market is people that are entering the workforce, but they make this range. And housing costs and costs to build housing is up here. So how do you bridge that gap?
Where, blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, love.
The word tiny comes to mind.
Yeah. And then I promise this is actually my last slide. This is just another way to look at it. So this is the Cook County estimated typical housing costs. So on top, I'll have to update this again, but 76,400 is the like median household income, right? Needed to afford a median value home. And then the 37 income needed to afford the median 2-bedroom apartment. And these are based off the HUD numbers, so we can talk about whether that's appropriate or not, but those are the numbers that I had. And then the median wages for occupations in demand in the region, and some that I thought that were more common in like a tourism-focused economy like Cook County. So, cashiers, nursing assistants, maids and housekeepers and cleaners, elementary school teachers, people that are elemental to a lot of communities, and how some of them just don't match up. So if you're a single mom elementary school teacher, you probably won't be able to afford a median value home. If you're a single parent home health and personal care aide, which is going to become more and more prevalent, like that is a very in-demand occupation, those median wages aren't going to support even the 2-bedroom rent that we think is low, too low already, so it just shows the gaps. Yep. So thank you. Sorry that I went over time. I always have too much, so.
That's
I know.
great, that's really
Yeah.
helpful.
But-
Appreciate it, because we're always saying, well, what's going on in the other counties? What's going on in
Mhm.
Aiken, or what's
Yeah.
happening? So the demographics.
And if you have like specific questions, you want to know what the median household income or price is for Aiken, I can easily pull that and send it to you whenever. So if you're, that comes up in a subsequent meeting, yep.
Your
Thank
hou-
you.
Do your housing statistics include Grand Portage?
Yes, they should, yep. The caveat is the response rates vary. So the response rates are higher for like the white population. For the native population, response rates are a little bit lower traditionally. So that might impact the accuracy of the data. That is, I'm reading a paper on that right now.
Like, how many, do you know generally, because you have like Picnic Bay, and that's all owned by the community. I mean, it's not individual things. And there's a lot of housing there, and people pay rent on that.
Rental units, yes.
Those are rental units. How many residences are owned by band members? I mean, it's real tricky because
Yeah.
it's not just a
That's
straightforward.
why- You know, that's why I kind of ask, because I think you're probably not getting a really accurate demographic.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, if your grandmother dies or your mom dies, you inherit the house if you choose to take over a payment on it, if it's not paid off yet, right? And it's the band that finances this housing to start with, so
Yeah.
you can't have all those numbers in this.
No, probably.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, probably
It's a-
not. Yeah.
So I
It's a
can
different-
throw it all kind of weird at you. I'm gonna retire this year from the county. I'm a tribal member. I own a home in Grand Portage that can only be sold to
A member of
another band member. Therefore, I'm gonna leave a job open for the county, but I'm leaving the county and selling my house.
Yeah.
That'll
Yeah.
just throw your numbers
There's
up.
all sorts of exceptions.
Well, thanks for throwing that in at the end, 'cause
No, that's a good point. Like, these are like summary statistics, right?
Yeah, no.
So, and yeah, there's going to be margins of error. There's going to be exceptions, depending on different populations. But oftentimes they are the best, like, that we have, so we can compare to other places.
Sure.
Like, that's probably where the value is the largest, because the like errors that we experience in this area should also probably be experienced in some other areas too in Minnesota. So the comparison of a county to a county is where these data probably have their best use. Not so much like $880 for gross rent. Like, what? It's more in the comparison by over time and space.
the other thing in statistical things is if you can make comparatives without having to have narrative to explain the differences, that's the best scenario. But still, it's better than nothing, and then the narrative helps you understand the nuance that exists between the comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to have some thoughts as to why a number is changing or,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
and that's the
I don't
use
like
of
leaving-
statistical.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
just to have the numbers, it's to understand what they're telling you.
Yeah, well, and to understand at the end of the day that there's people and families behind all of them too, which gets lost, I think, when you look at spreadsheets as much as I do. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much
Well,
for your
thank you
time.
much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Again.
With
Thanks
that,
for
we're
inviting me.
adjourned.
What's that?
I couldn't imagine having to compile that information.
Oh,
Apply for
Oh.
certain
I started taking Google Analytics.
Um,
or